The dresses started changing first. I noticed it on a Tuesday night in September when Kiera came home at 2:17 a.m., wearing something I'd never seen before, a black cocktail dress that hugged her frame like expensive silk. She moved through our kitchen with the careful precision of someone who'd practiced this entrance, heels clicking against hardwood in a rhythm that suggested confidence rather than fatigue. "How was book club?" I asked from the kitchen table, laptop open, pretending to work on client code. "Enlightening," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We discussed female empowerment themes, very inspiring stuff." The lie settled between us like dust. I'd driven past the community center earlier that evening. Dark windows, empty parking lot. No book club meeting scheduled according to their website, which I'd checked twice. "My name is Beck Derron, and I fix computer systems for a living. Pattern recognition comes naturally to me. When data doesn't match expected parameters, I investigate. When systems start showing anomalies, I document everything before making corrections." Kiera disappeared upstairs. Water ran in the master bathroom for 23 minutes, longer than her usual routine. I heard the hairdryer, then silence. When she finally came to bed, she smelled like expensive perfume I hadn't bought her and soap that wasn't ours. "Long day," she murmured, settling on her side of the bed with deliberate distance between us. "Seems like it," I replied. The next Tuesday followed an identical pattern. Different dress, emerald green this time, but same timeline. Book club excuse, same extended bathroom routine, same foreign perfume scent. By the third Tuesday, I'd stopped asking questions. Instead, I started documenting. Kiera worked at Morrison & Associates, a mid-tier marketing firm downtown. Her official schedule ran 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. But her actual arrivals home had shifted dramatically over the past month. Tuesday and Thursday nights stretched past midnight. Friday evenings vanished entirely, replaced by overnight strategy sessions and team-building retreats. "I'm really growing professionally," she explained one morning over coffee, scrolling through her phone with manicured nails I definitely hadn't paid for. "Ms. Havel says I have real leadership potential. These extra projects could mean a promotion by Christmas." "That's great," I said, watching her thumb pause over a text message before quickly closing the screen. "What kind of projects?" "Client development stuff. Relationship building. You wouldn't find it interesting." She was probably right about that last part. The bills started telling their own story. Her credit card statements showed charges I couldn't explain, luxury spa treatments, boutique clothing stores, expensive restaurants during her supposed work hours. When I mentioned the unusual spending, Kiera's response came prepared. "I'm investing in myself, Beck. Professional appearance matters in marketing. If I look successful, clients take me seriously. This is basic career strategy." "With whose money?" Her laugh had sharp edges. "Our money. We're partners, remember? Or are you going to start micromanaging my every purchase now?" The word micromanaging hung in the air like an accusation. I recognized the technique. Deflection through offense. Make the questioner defend themselves instead of answering the question. "I'm just trying to understand the budget impact," I said. "Maybe if you showed more interest in supporting my career goals instead of questioning every decision, we'd have better communication." Another deflection. Another accusation. Pattern recognition again. I stopped bringing up the bills. Instead, I made some adjustments. The first change was small. I canceled her premium streaming subscriptions. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime. Services she claimed to use for research, but never seemed to actually watch. She didn't mention the cancellations for 2 weeks. When she finally noticed, her reaction was predictable. "The streaming services aren't working," she said, frowning at her laptop screen. "Probably a technical issue," I replied. "I'll look into it." I never looked into it. The second change was larger. I called our credit card companies and reduced her spending limits to essential amounts: grocery money, gas, basic necessities. When the cards started declining at boutiques and spas, Kiera adapted quickly. Too quickly. She started paying cash for everything. Crisp hundreds that appeared in her wallet without explanation. When I asked about the sudden cash flow, her answer came smooth as rehearsed dialogue. "I've been saving money from my lunch budget, brown bagging it instead of eating out. Basic financial responsibility." But I'd seen the restaurant charges continuing on our joint account. She wasn't brown bagging anything. Someone else was funding her new lifestyle. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt the cold satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed. Data matched predictions. The system was behaving exactly as corrupted systems behave. Now I needed to understand the full scope of the corruption. Thursday night, Kiera announced another late strategy session. She emerged from our bedroom wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, makeup applied with professional precision. "Don't wait up," she said. kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like expensive gloss. These client dinners run long. After her car disappeared down our suburban street, I opened her laptop. Kiera had always been careless with digital security. Same passwords for everything, browser set to remember credentials, automatic syncing enabled across devices. She treated technology like magic, useful but incomprehensible. I treated it like a language I spoke fluently. Her email revealed the usual work correspondence, nothing suspicious. But her calendar told a different story. Hidden appointments appeared when I adjusted the view settings, entries marked private, scheduled during her supposed overtime hours, hotel reservations, spa appointments, hair and makeup sessions, all paid through accounts I couldn't access. The pattern was clear now. Kiera wasn't working late. She was working someone else. The hotel receipts appeared in her purse 3 days later. I wasn't snooping, just moving her bag from the kitchen counter where it was blocking the coffee maker. The papers fell out when I lifted it, spreading across the floor like evidence presenting itself. 4 receipts from the Grandview Hotel downtown, presidential suite, 2-night minimum stays, charges for champagne service, couples massage packages, and something called a romantic ambiance enhancement. All paid with a credit card I'd never seen before. The name on the receipts wasn't hers. Jasper Linton. I photographed everything before carefully replacing the papers exactly as they'd fallen. Then I went to my computer and started researching. Jasper Jazz Linton, 42 years old, venture capitalist with Morrison & Associates parent company. Divorced 6 months ago. Drove a white Tesla Model S, license plate Jazz 1. LinkedIn profile full of networking events and synergy buzzwords. The kind of man who wore expensive watches and called everyone buddy. He was also Kiera's direct supervisor's boss. The pieces assembled themselves with mechanical precision. Kiera's sudden career ambitions. The mysterious cash flow. The professional wardrobe upgrades. The overnight strategy sessions. She wasn't climbing the corporate ladder through merit. She was climbing it through someone else's bedroom. My phone buzzed with a text from Kiera. Running late tonight. Big presentation tomorrow needs final touches. Love you. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m. According to her location sharing, which she'd forgotten to disable, she was at the Grandview Hotel. I drove downtown. The hotel parking garage held Jazz's Tesla in a reserved spot near the elevator. I parked 3 spaces away and waited. Rain drummed against my windshield, turning the concrete structure into an echo chamber. My breath fogged the windows as evening stretched toward night. At 11:23 p.m., they appeared. Kiera emerged from the elevator wearing the red dress, her hair slightly mussed despite obvious attempts to fix it. Jazz followed close behind, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hand rested on the small of her back with casual ownership. They talked quietly beside his car, their body language intimate and familiar. This wasn't a new arrangement. The way she leaned into him, the way he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, these were practiced gestures, comfortable routines. Jazz kissed her forehead before opening her car door. She drove away first. He waited 5 minutes before following, probably a precaution they'd agreed upon. I sat in the darkness, processing what I'd witnessed. The smart move would be confrontation, demand explanations, threaten ultimatums, file for divorce, and split our assets according to Massachusetts law. But I'd spent 15 years building computer systems, and I understood something most people missed. The best way to deal with malicious code isn't immediate deletion. First, you study its behavior, learn its patterns, understand its weaknesses. Then you design a better system to replace it. I drove home and started planning. The next morning, Kiera appeared in the kitchen wearing a silk robe and satisfied smile. She moved differently, looser, more confident. Success apparently agreed with her. "How was the presentation?" I asked, not looking up from my coffee. "Brilliant. Jazz, Mr. Linton, said it was exactly what the client needed. He thinks I'm ready for bigger responsibilities." "I'm sure he does." She paused, studying my tone. "You don't sound happy for me." "I'm thrilled you're finding fulfillment at work." The words carried just enough edge to make her defensive. Perfect. "Beck, I know this transition has been hard for you. Me growing professionally, becoming more independent. But marriages require space for individual growth. We can't stay static forever." The speech sounded rehearsed, probably something she'd discussed with Jazz during pillow talk, or maybe with her friends during their weekly gossip sessions. I recognized the language, therapy speak mixed with self-help mantras. "You're absolutely right," I said. "Growth is important." She relaxed, apparently satisfied that her explanation had worked. "I'm glad you understand. Some husbands get threatened when their wives start succeeding. But you're more evolved than that. Much more evolved." After she left for work, I called my sister Rena. Rena worked as a paralegal at a family law firm downtown. She understood legal systems the way I understood computer systems, with precision, patience, and healthy skepticism about human nature. I need some advice about asset protection, I told her. What kind of assets? The kind that might need protecting from someone who's been making unauthorized financial decisions. Silence stretched across the phone line. Rena had always been sharp about reading between lines. How unauthorized are we talking? Forged signature unauthorized. Beck, what's going on? I explained about the mysterious cash, the hotel receipts, the credit cards I'd never seen. Rena listened without interrupting, her paralegal training evident in the questions she asked. Do you have documentation? I'm gathering it. Good. Document everything. Dates, amounts, locations. If she's been accessing joint assets for personal use without your knowledge, that's a problem. If she's been forging your signature on financial documents, that's a bigger problem. How much bigger? The kind that affects asset division in divorce proceedings. Courts don't like financial deception. The word divorce hung between us. Neither of us had said it directly, but it was the logical endpoint of this conversation. I'm not ready for that step yet, I said. What are you ready for? Good question. I wasn't sure about the endgame, but I knew the next move. I'm ready to stop being a passive participant in my own marriage. That afternoon, I implemented the first real change. I called our bank and froze all joint accounts pending a security review. Legitimate procedure when suspicious activity appears on shared finances. The freeze would last 48 hours minimum, longer if I requested additional investigation. Kiera discovered the freeze at 6:15 p.m. when her card declined at an upscale restaurant downtown. She called me from the parking lot, voice tight with controlled anger. Beck, there's something wrong with our accounts. My card isn't working. That's strange. What were you trying to buy? Dinner. I'm at Chez Laurent with some colleagues. This is embarrassing. Chez Laurent, $200 per person French restaurant. Not exactly typical colleague dining. I'll call the bank tomorrow and sort it out, I said. Tomorrow, Beck, I'm standing here looking like an idiot. Can't you call now? Bank's closed. Nothing I can do until morning. The pause stretched long enough for me to imagine her expression. Kiera hated being inconvenienced, especially in public situations where her image was at stake. Fine, I'll figure something out. She hung up without saying goodbye. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a Venmo notification. Linton had sent Kiera $300 with the message, "For dinner and whatever else you need, beautiful." The transaction appeared on my screen because Kiera had linked our joint account to her Venmo profile months ago, back when we actually shared financial transparency. Now I had documentary evidence of Jazz funding her expenses. The system was revealing itself, one data point at a time. Kiera came home that night with a strategy. "We need to talk," she announced, settling into the living room chair that gave her the best sightlines and psychological advantage. She'd changed from whatever outfit she'd worn to dinner into comfortable clothes, yoga pants, and an oversized sweater that made her look vulnerable and approachable. The costume change was deliberate. "I'm concerned about your behavior lately," she began, voice soft with practiced concern. "The credit card restrictions, the account freeze today. This isn't like you, Beck. You've always trusted me to make reasonable financial decisions." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing our joint account history. 3 months of unexplained cash withdrawals, each one just under the reporting threshold that would trigger automatic bank notifications. "Have I?" I asked. "Of course you have. We've been partners for 8 years. When have I ever given you reason to doubt my judgment?" The question hung in the air like a trap waiting to be sprung. Any specific example I provided would be dismissed or explained away. Better to stay general. "I'm just being cautious with our finances right now." "Cautious about what, exactly?" "About spending patterns that don't match our budget." Her expression shifted slightly, a micro-expression of irritation quickly suppressed. "Beck, I explained about my professional development expenses. This is an investment in our future. When I get promoted, we'll both benefit." "And if you don't get promoted?" "Why would you assume I won't? Don't you believe in my capabilities?" Another trap. Question my motives instead of addressing the issue. Make me defend my support for her career instead of explaining the mysterious expenses. "I believe in your capabilities," I said carefully. "I'm questioning the expenses. The expenses that are helping me advance professionally. The expenses that show I'm serious about my career growth. The expenses that demonstrate commitment to excellence." She was repeating key phrases, hammering them home through repetition. Professional development, career growth, investment in our future. The language was designed to make opposition seem unreasonable. Kiera, where's the money coming from? What money? The cash you've been spending. The money for clothes, dinners, hotel stays. It's not coming from our accounts. Her pause lasted exactly 2 seconds, long enough to select the right response, short enough to seem natural. Beck, I'm worried about you. This paranoid behavior, the accusations, the financial control. It's not healthy. Have you considered that maybe you're struggling with my success? Deflection, accusation, psychological diagnosis, the triple play of advanced gaslighting. I'm not struggling with anything except unexplained expenses. There's nothing unexplained. I've told you repeatedly, these are professional investments. The fact that you can't accept that explanation says more about your insecurities than my spending. She stood up, moving to the window with theatrical weariness. I think you should talk to someone, Beck. A counselor, maybe. This controlling behavior isn't good for either of us. The conversation ended there. She went upstairs, leaving me with the clear implication that I was the problem requiring professional help. But I'd learned something valuable. Kiera had prepared for this confrontation. The responses came too smooth, too practiced. She'd anticipated my questions and rehearsed her answers, which meant she'd discussed our marriage problems with someone else, probably Jazz. The next morning brought phase 2 of her campaign. I discovered this when my phone started buzzing with concerned text messages from Kiera's friends. Peyton, her college roommate. Hey Beck, Kiera mentioned you guys are going through a rough patch. Just want you to know I'm here if you need to talk. Monica, her yoga instructor. Sending positive energy your way. Kiera says you're dealing with some stress. Have you tried meditation? Jennifer, her book club friend. Hope everything works out with you and Kiera. She's such a strong woman. I admire how she's handling everything. The messages kept coming throughout the day, each one carefully worded to seem supportive while reinforcing the same narrative. Kiera was handling a difficult situation with grace and strength. I was the source of stress requiring management. She was building a support network and controlling the story simultaneously. Impressive, actually. That evening, I called Rena again. She's getting ahead of the narrative, I explained, telling friends I'm being controlling and paranoid, setting up the story that she's the victim of an unreasonable husband. Classic strategy, Rena said. Establish the preferred version of events before the other side can present their evidence. How are you planning to respond? I'm not. Beck, think about it, Rena. If I start calling her friends to defend myself, what does that look like? Desperate husband trying to control his wife's relationships. It reinforces her story. So, what's your play? I let her build her narrative. Meanwhile, I build my evidence. What kind of evidence? I pulled up the folder on my desktop where I'd been organizing documentation, bank statements, credit card records, hotel receipts, location data from her phone's GPS history. The kind that speaks louder than stories. The breakthrough came 2 days later, buried in our mortgage paperwork. I'd been reviewing our financial documents when I found the application for a home equity line of credit. $50,000, approved 3 weeks ago, both signatures required for joint property. My signature was there, perfectly forged. I stared at the document for 10 minutes, processing the implications. Kiera hadn't just been spending mysterious money, she'd been stealing it from our home's equity. The forged signature made it wire fraud, a federal offense. More importantly, it gave me legal grounds for immediate action. I photographed the document from multiple angles, then called the bank's fraud department. I need to report an unauthorized signature on a recent loan application, I told the representative. Can you hold while I transfer you to our security department? The security interview took 40 minutes. They asked detailed questions about my signature, my knowledge of the application, my authorization for the credit line. I answered everything honestly. No, I hadn't signed the document. No, I hadn't authorized the loan. Yes, I wanted to file a formal fraud report. Mr. Derron will need to freeze the credit line pending investigation. Any funds already disbursed will need to be returned immediately. How much has been disbursed? $37,000, withdrawn in increments over the past 3 weeks. $37,000. Enough to fund months of luxury hotel stays, expensive dinners, and professional wardrobe upgrades. Enough to constitute serious financial fraud. We'll be contacting local law enforcement as required by federal banking regulations, the representative continued. Someone will be in touch within 24 hours. After hanging up, I sat in my home office staring at the mortgage documents. The forged signature was good, not perfect, but good enough to fool a busy loan processor. Kiera had practiced, probably using other documents as reference. This wasn't impulsive behavior, this was calculated theft. My phone rang. Kiera's ringtone. Beck, something's wrong with our credit line. The bank called saying there's a security hold. They want to speak with both of us tomorrow morning. Her voice carried just the right note of confusion and concern. If I hadn't seen the forged signature myself, I might have believed she was genuinely puzzled. That's strange, I said. What kind of security hold? Something about signature verification, probably just routine bureaucracy. Can you come to the bank with me tomorrow to sort it out? Of course. Great, I'm sure it's nothing serious. Banks are so paranoid these days. After she hung up, I realized she was probably right about one thing. Tomorrow would definitely sort everything out. The bank meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. Kiera arrived wearing her professional armor, navy blazer, modest jewelry, minimal makeup. She looked like someone who belonged in boardrooms and loan applications, the kind of person banks trusted with large sums of money. Mr. and Mrs. Derron, the loan officer began, spreading documents across his desk. We've identified some irregularities with your recent home equity application. Kiera leaned forward with appropriate concern. What kind of irregularities? Signature analysis indicates potential forgery on the joint application. We'll need to verify both signatures through handwriting comparison. The loan officer produced a blank form and 2 pens. If you could both sign here, exactly as you would on any legal document. I signed first, my usual scrawl unchanged by 8 years of marriage. Then Kiera signed, her handwriting suddenly different from the signature on the loan application. Smaller, more careful, less confident. The loan officer compared both signatures to the application using a magnifying glass. His expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight nod he gave to someone behind us. Mrs. Derron, your signature shows significant variation from the application. Can you explain the discrepancy? Kiera's pause lasted 3 seconds too long. I sign differently depending on the situation, sometimes more formal, sometimes casual. I'm sure that's normal. And Mr. Derron, your signature also varies considerably from the application. Because I never signed that application. The words dropped into silence like stones into still water. Kiera's head snapped toward me, her composed expression cracking slightly. Beck, what are you saying? I'm saying I never authorized a home equity loan. I never signed that document, and I filed a fraud report yesterday. Her face went through several expressions in rapid sequence. Confusion, hurt, anger, calculation. She settled on wounded betrayal. You filed a fraud report? Against me? Your own wife? I filed a report about an unauthorized loan application with a forged signature. The loan officer cleared his throat. Mr. Derron, are you stating definitively that this signature is not yours? Absolutely. And Mrs. Derron, do you maintain that both signatures on the application are authentic? Kiera looked trapped between competing lies. Admitting the signature was forged meant confessing to bank fraud. Maintaining it was authentic meant claiming I was lying about my own signature. There must be some mistake, she said finally. Maybe the documents got mixed up somehow. Ma'am, we have security camera footage of you submitting this application in person 3 weeks ago. You presented both signatures as authentic at that time. The trap had closed completely. Video evidence, handwriting analysis, and my fraud report created an airtight case. Kiera's face went pale as the implications registered. I think I need to speak with a lawyer, she said quietly. That's probably wise, the loan officer agreed. We'll be forwarding our findings to the district attorney's office as required by federal banking regulations. The drive home passed in absolute silence. Kiera stared out her window while I focused on traffic. Neither of us wanted to start the conversation that would end our marriage, but when we reached our driveway, she finally spoke. How long have you known? About the affair? 3 weeks. About the loan fraud? Yesterday. You've been planning this. I've been documenting it. She turned to study my profile. The credit card restrictions, the account freeze, the bank investigation. You orchestrated all of it. I responded to your choices, Kiera. You chose to have an affair. You chose to forge my signature. You chose to steal from our home equity. I just chose to stop enabling it. Stop enabling it? Beck, I made one mistake. You made dozens of mistakes. The affair was just the most obvious one. We sat in the car, engine ticking as it cooled, both of us processing the end of our marriage. 8 years reduced to a fraud investigation and divorce paperwork. What happens now? She asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices. And us? There is no us. There's you, me, and the lawyers will need to sort out the mess you created. That evening, Kiera packed 2 suitcases and moved out. She didn't say where she was going, but I assumed Jazz's apartment was the most likely destination. They'd need to coordinate their stories anyway, since his financial support would be part of the investigation. The house felt different with her gone. Quieter, but not empty. More like a system finally running without corrupted code interfering with normal operations. I spent the evening organizing documents for my divorce attorney, bank records, hotel receipts, forged loan applications, and screenshots of Jazz's Venmo payments. The evidence painted a clear picture of financial infidelity and fraud. My phone buzzed with text messages from Kiera's friends, their tone noticeably different from the earlier concerned outreach. Peyton. Beck, I can't believe you're putting Kiera through this. She's devastated. Monica. Calling the police on your own wife? That's incredibly cruel. Jennifer. Kiera is staying strong despite everything you're putting her through. She deserves better. The narrative had shifted. Now I was the vindictive husband destroying an innocent woman through legal harassment. Kiera's gaslighting campaign had evolved into full victim mythology. I deleted the messages without responding. The next morning brought a call from Detective Maria Santos with the Financial Crimes Unit. Mr. Derron, we've reviewed the bank's fraud report and supporting documentation. We'd like to schedule an interview to discuss the case. Of course. When works for you? This afternoon, if possible. We're also scheduling interviews with Mrs. Derron and Mr. Jasper Linton. Jazz is part of the investigation? Mr. Linton provided financial support that enabled the fraudulent activity. We need to determine his level of knowledge and involvement. After hanging up, I realized the investigation had expanded beyond simple forgery. They were looking at conspiracy charges, money laundering, and potentially racketeering if Jazz had used company funds to support Kiera's spending. The system was revealing more corruption than I'd originally suspected. That afternoon's police interview lasted 2 hours. Detective Santos asked detailed questions about our marriage, finances, and the timeline of my discovery. I provided documentation for everything, walking through the evidence methodically. Mr. Derron, in your opinion, was this fraudulent activity planned in advance? Absolutely. The signature practice, the incremental withdrawals, the cash spending to avoid paper trails. This wasn't impulsive behavior. And you believe Mr. Linton was aware of the fraud? He was funding her expenses while she stole from our home equity. Either he knew about the loan fraud, or he's remarkably incurious about his girlfriend's sudden access to large amounts of cash. Detective Santos made notes throughout our conversation. As I left the police station, I realized I'd just provided testimony that could send both Kiera and Jazz to federal prison. The thought should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I felt the satisfaction of a system administrator who'd finally cleaned all the malicious code from a corrupted network. The system was running properly again. The call from Morrison and Associates came at 8:47 a.m. on Thursday. Mr. Derron, this is Patricia Havel, Kiera's supervisor. I'm calling about some concerning developments regarding your wife's employment status. I set down my coffee and opened my laptop. What kind of developments? We've been contacted by law enforcement regarding financial irregularities involving Kiera and Mr. Linton. As part of our internal investigation, we've discovered unauthorized use of company resources and violation of our ethics policies. What does that mean for her employment? Kiera has been terminated effective immediately. Her access to company systems has been revoked, and we're conducting a full audit of her client accounts and expense reports. The conversation lasted 10 more minutes. Ms. Havel asked careful questions about my knowledge of Kiera's activities, clearly trying to determine if I might pursue legal action against the company. I assured her my dispute was with my wife, not her employer. After hanging up, I realized Kiera's professional life had collapsed as thoroughly as her personal life. The affair with Jazz hadn't just destroyed our marriage, it had ended her career. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Kiera, using a friend's phone. We need to talk. Can you meet me at Riverside Park at 2 p.m.? I stared at the message for several minutes, considering my options. The smart move was probably to refer all communication through lawyers, but curiosity won over caution. I'll be there, I replied. Riverside Park sat empty except for a few joggers and dog walkers when I arrived. Kiera waited on a bench near the playground, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual professional attire. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of her corporate armor. Thank you for coming, she said as I approached. What did you want to discuss? Beck, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But this has gone too far. The police investigation, losing my job, Jazz's legal problems. Can't we find a way to resolve this privately? I sat on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining distance. What kind of resolution did you have in mind? I'll pay back the money. Every cent from the home equity loan. We can get divorced quietly, split our assets fairly, and move on with our lives. No criminal charges, no public scandal. Where would you get $37,000? Her pause revealed the flaw in her proposal. I'll figure something out. Payment plan, maybe. The important thing is making this right. Kiera, you committed federal bank fraud. That's not something I can just forgive and forget. You could drop the charges. I filed a fraud report. The bank and police are handling the investigation now. It's out of my hands. She turned to face me directly, her expression shifting from pleading to calculating. Beck, if this goes to trial, everything comes out publicly. Your friends, your clients, everyone will know about our marriage problems. Is that really what you want? Are you threatening me? I'm pointing out that public scandals damage everyone involved. Your reputation, your business, your family relationships. Rena's law firm won't appreciate the negative publicity either. The threat was subtle, but clear. If I didn't cooperate with her damage control plan, she'd make sure the scandal hurt me as much as possible. Kiera, you seem to be confused about our relative positions here. You're facing federal fraud charges. Jazz is under investigation for conspiracy and money laundering. Your career is over, your reputation is destroyed, and you have no income or assets. I have friends. You have enablers who are starting to realize they backed the wrong horse. How many of them do you think will still take your calls when the criminal charges become public? Her confident facade cracked slightly. This vindictive behavior isn't like you, Beck. You're right. The old Beck would have accepted your gaslighting, paid your bills, and pretended everything was fine, but that Beck was operating on corrupted code. I've upgraded my system. What does that mean? It means I'm done being manipulated by someone who thinks consequences are optional. I stood to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Beck, please. I'm asking for mercy here. We loved each other once. Doesn't that count for something? You loved what I provided. Financial security, emotional support, social respectability. You never loved me. That's not true. Kiera, you forged my signature to steal money for your affair. If that's love, I prefer indifference. I walked back to my car, leaving her on the bench. In my rearview mirror, I watched her make a phone call, probably to Jazz or one of her remaining friends, still trying to manage the narrative, still believing she could talk her way out of consequences. That evening brought another call from Detective Santos. Mr. Derron, we've completed our initial interviews with Mrs. Derron and Mr. Linton. Both are claiming the loan fraud was a misunderstanding, that they believed you had given verbal consent for the application. That's interesting, since I never spoke to either of them about a home equity loan. We assumed as much. We've also discovered additional irregularities in Mr. Linton's financial records. It appears he used company funds to support Mrs. Derron's expenses, possibly violating federal embezzlement statutes. How much money are we talking about? Preliminary estimates suggest over $60,000 in unauthorized transfers from client accounts. We're working with Morrison & Associates to trace the complete financial trail. After hanging up, I realized the investigation had uncovered far more corruption than anyone had initially suspected. What started as simple adultery had evolved into a complex fraud scheme involving forged documents, stolen home equity, and embezzled corporate funds. Kiera and Jazz hadn't just betrayed their spouses and employers, they'd built an entire criminal enterprise around their affair. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Jazz's number. Beck, we need to talk, he said without preamble. I don't think that's appropriate. Listen to me very carefully. This situation has gotten out of hand. Kiera made some poor choices, but she doesn't deserve to go to prison. Neither do I. What you deserve isn't really my concern? It should be, because if this goes to trial, I'll make sure everyone knows about your vindictive behavior. The financial abuse, the emotional manipulation, the way you drove Kiera into my arms through neglect and control. Another threat, this one less subtle than Kiera's. Jazz was promising to destroy my reputation if I didn't cooperate with their damage control efforts. Jazz, you embezzled $60,000 to fund an affair with my wife. Your credibility as a character witness is somewhat limited. That's allegedly embezzled. Nothing's been proven yet. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit seems pretty confident about their evidence. Silence stretched across the phone line. Apparently Jazz hadn't realized federal investigators were now involved. Beck, let's be reasonable here. We're all adults. Mistakes were made, but nobody needs to go to prison. What would it take to resolve this quietly? A time machine. What? You'd need a time machine to go back and not commit federal crimes. Since that's not available, you'll need to face the consequences of your choices. You sanctimonious piece of... I hung up before he could finish the threat. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw two men in expensive suits standing on my front porch. They had the professional demeanor of people accustomed to making problems disappear. I didn't answer the door. Instead, I called Detective Santos and reported the attempted intimidation. She promised to have patrol cars monitor my house and suggested I consider a restraining order if the harassment continued. As I watched the men drive away in a black sedan, I realized Jazz had more resources than I'd initially suspected. Venture capitalists moved in circles where problems were solved through pressure and influence rather than legal processes. But federal fraud investigations weren't easily influenced by corporate intimidation tactics. The system was bigger than Jazz's network, and it was grinding forward with mechanical inevitability. And 3 weeks later, the indictments came down. Detective Santos called with the news. Kiera faced federal charges for bank fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Jazz faced additional charges for embezzlement, money laundering, and racketeering. Both were looking at potential prison sentences of 5 to 10 years. The grand jury was particularly interested in the systematic nature of the fraud, Detective Santos explained. This wasn't impulsive behavior. It was an organized criminal enterprise designed to steal money from multiple sources. What happens next? Arraignment next week, then plea negotiations. Their lawyers will probably try to work out some kind of deal, but the evidence is overwhelming. Your documentation was crucial in building the case. After hanging up, I felt the strange emptiness that follows the completion of any major project. For months, I'd been focused on gathering evidence and pursuing justice. Now the legal system would handle the final resolution. My phone buzzed with a text from Rena. Saw the news about the indictments. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I replied. Ready to move forward. Good. The divorce papers are ready for filing whenever you want to proceed. I'd been avoiding the divorce proceedings while the criminal investigation was ongoing, but now seemed like the appropriate time to finalize everything. Kiera would be too busy with her legal defense to contest the asset division. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Peyton stood on my doorstep, looking uncomfortable and apologetic. She'd been one of Kiera's most vocal supporters throughout the scandal, so her presence was surprising. Beck, can we talk for a few minutes? I invited her in, curious about her change of heart. I owe you an apology, she began, settling into the living room chair Kiera had favored during our last conversation. When all this started, Kiera told us you were being controlling and paranoid. We believed her because we wanted to believe her. What changed your mind? The FBI interviewed me last week. They showed me evidence, bank records, hotel receipts, forged documents. Things Kiera never mentioned when she was asking for our support. Peyton looked genuinely shaken. Beck, we had no idea how extensive this was. The money, the lies, the criminal charges. Kiera made it sound like you were overreacting to normal marital problems. She's always been good at controlling narratives. Too good. I feel like an idiot for believing her stories about your behavior. You were never controlling or abusive. You were just trying to protect yourself from someone who was robbing you blind. We talked for another hour. Peyton filled in details about Kiera's manipulation campaign, how she'd portrayed herself as the victim of an unreasonable husband, how she'd solicited sympathy and support while concealing the criminal behavior that caused our problems. Most of her friends have stopped taking her calls, Peyton admitted. Once the indictments became public, people started realizing they'd been manipulated too. After Peyton left, I reflected on the complete collapse of Kiera's support network. The friends who'd sent concerned text messages were now avoiding association with a federal criminal defendant. The career that had supposedly justified her professional development expenses was gone. The lover who'd funded her lifestyle was facing his own legal catastrophe. She'd traded everything stable and legitimate in her life for a fantasy that lasted less than 6 months. The next morning brought a call from a number I didn't recognize. Beck, this is Kiera. I'm using my lawyer's phone. What do you want? I want to make a deal. I'm not in a position to make deals. The federal prosecutors are handling your case now. Not about the criminal charges. About the divorce. I'll sign whatever papers you want. Accept whatever asset division you propose. No contest, no delays, no complications. In exchange for what? I want you to write a letter to the prosecutor supporting leniency in my sentencing. Character witness testimony about our marriage, my mental state, the emotional factors that led to my poor decisions. The request was audacious, even by Kiera's standards. She wanted me to help minimize her prison sentence in exchange for not contesting a divorce she had no grounds to contest anyway. Kiera, you committed federal crimes. You stole money from our home equity, embezzled corporate funds, and built an entire fraud scheme around your affair. Why would I recommend leniency? Because despite everything, we were married for 8 years. Because you're not a vindictive person. Because showing mercy would be the right thing to do. The right thing to do was not commit federal crimes. Beck, I'm going to prison. My career is over. My reputation is destroyed. My life is ruined. Isn't that enough punishment? That's not punishment, Kiera. That's consequences. What's the difference? Punishment is something imposed from outside. Consequences are the natural result of your own choices. You chose to have an affair, forge documents, and steal money. Prison is just the logical outcome of those choices. Silence stretched across the phone line. Finally, she spoke again, her voice smaller and more defeated than I'd ever heard it. I never meant for it to go this far. But you did mean to have the affair. You did mean to forge my signature. You did mean to steal the money. The fact that you didn't anticipate the consequences doesn't make you less responsible for the choices. So, you won't help with the sentencing? I won't lie to federal prosecutors about your character or mental state, but I won't actively seek to increase your punishment either. The evidence speaks for itself. After she hung up, I realized that was probably the last conversation we'd ever have as husband and wife. The divorce would be finalized through lawyers, and her legal problems would be resolved through the court system. 8 years of marriage reduced to paperwork and criminal proceedings. 3 months later, I attended the sentencing hearing. Kiera received 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. Jazz received 7 years for the more extensive embezzlement charges. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to their victims, the bank, Morrison and Associates, and me. I watched from the gallery as they were led away in handcuffs, their expensive clothes replaced by orange jumpsuits. The transformation was complete, from successful professionals to convicted felons in less than a year. After the hearing, Detective Santos approached me in the courthouse hallway. Mr. Derron, I wanted to thank you for your cooperation throughout this investigation. Your documentation and testimony were essential in securing these convictions. I just provided the facts. You did more than that. You showed remarkable restraint in a situation where most people would have acted impulsively. Your systematic approach to gathering evidence made this case much stronger. As I drove home from the courthouse, I reflected on the detective's words. She was right about the systematic approach. I'd treated the investigation like debugging corrupted code, methodically identifying problems and implementing solutions. But I'd learned something important about human systems versus computer systems. When you clean malicious code from a computer, the system returns to its original state. When you remove toxic people from your life, you don't go back to who you were before. You become someone better. The house felt different now, not just quiet, but peaceful. I'd redecorated the living room, replacing furniture that carried memories of arguments and manipulation. The home office, where I'd spent months gathering evidence, had been converted into a workshop for woodworking projects. I was building things instead of documenting their destruction. My phone rang as I pulled into the driveway, Rena's number. How did the sentencing go? She asked. 4 years for Kiera, 7 for Jazz, full restitution ordered. How do you feel about it? I considered the question carefully. Satisfied. Not happy exactly, but satisfied that the system worked correctly. And now? Now I move forward. The divorce is final, the house is mine, and the legal drama is over. Time to focus on building something new instead of cleaning up someone else's mess. Any regrets? About the marriage? Yes. About how I handled the investigation? No. After hanging up, I stood in my driveway looking at the house that was now entirely mine. No joint accounts, no shared responsibilities, no one else's choices affecting my financial security. The system was clean, optimized, and running smoothly. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely optimistic about the future. The account had finally settled at midnight, and the balance was exactly what it should be.